Aikwe, Neknamalita, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian. And today I will be talking about my review of Dark Archives by Megan Rosenbloom. So Dark Archives, the full title is A Librarian's Investigation into the Science and History of Books Bound in Human Skin. And I actually heard about this book through My Favorite Murder, a podcast, a true crime podcast put on by Georgia Hardstark and Karen Calgariff. Now, I've listened to this podcast for several years now. I go in and out of phases of listening to it, just because sometimes true crime can be a little dark. I mean, it's pretty dark most of the time, but I feel like there's definite moods where I'm more into it than others. And after, I like the idea of like a My Favorite Murder book group or something. And for a while they kind of had this idea of doing it. What? So they had an idea of doing like a book group, book club type thing for My Favorite Murder. And I think it just kind of fell through. So the whole thing with My Favorite Murder, though, is what I do like about it is that they're very creative. And plus they are very aware of their own mental health, of like what they can and cannot take on. And so the idea of a book group, as great as it was, fell through just because they weren't able to keep up on it. And which is understandable. I like the idea of a book club or buddy reading a book with somebody, but I am a moody bitch and can't always determine when exactly I'm going to get to a book. So, like, as any of you who have ever gifted me a book will know, it's still sitting on my TBR shelf. And probably will for the next several years. So when they had mentioned Dark Archives, I believe they said that Georgia, is friends with Megan Rosenbloom. Megan Rosenbloom is a medical librarian down in LA. And they had basically just kind of briefly pitched this book in one of their podcasts. I don't believe it was sponsored at all. It was just hey, if you're looking for a book, this is one that's coming out. So it piqued my interest because, I mean, it's a little morbid and gruesome. And yeah. But I wasn't sure about it when I got it. So it took me a little bit. I've had this for almost a year now. I listened to this book via Libro FM. Through my credit. I'll have my associate link down in the description down below if you're interested. And I actually really enjoyed it. So it is about books bound, it is about Megan Rosenbloom going into and finding these books bound in human skin, but she does it in a way that's very enticing because she manages to partner up with a group essentially that goes and tests these books to see if they're actually made and bound in human skin. And if I understand correctly, it's like a test where they, as long as they get just the tiniest tear or cut from the binding, they can test it. And they said as long as like a human can see it, that's more than enough for testing. And so a lot of books that are claimed to be bound in human skin, whether by its history or just by a note in the cover or whatever, are being tested to either be proven wrong or not. It was really interesting her getting into the history of this. She goes into so much that I hope to look more into, because she goes into not only the history of binding books in human skin, which I immediately kind of thought of the Nazis, which isn't particularly true, but she goes into like how we continuously think that, as well as where it actually comes from, as well as evidence of books that are bound in human skin and why. A lot of them don't have answers like that. A lot of them are, unfortunately, doctors being fairly distant from their patients and experimenting and wanting to create more value to their personal libraries. Yeah, just the detail and the amount of information that she put into this was really great, and it's actually a relatively short book. This is 274 pages. Yeah, ultimately it was just really fun and really interesting. It wasn't as morbid as I thought, but no, in terms of content warnings, there is talk of murder, death, grave robbing, graphic depictions of a tannery, so just be aware of that going into this. But it was also just nice, like, as someone who's now working in a library and debating if I want to get my master's in library science degree, Megan herself was really interesting in terms of, like, I didn't know there was such thing as a medical librarian. How would I go about doing that? Where would I have to go for that? So it made me question, like, it gave me the broader question of, like, what other kind of professional librarians are there? Like, in terms of, like, is there a marine biology librarian? Is there, like, an art librarianship? Etc., etc. So it's really making me look more into that, because that sounds really fascinating. As much as I enjoy being the resource and information specialist in my current university library, it is curious to me if I want to stay in that realm of academic librarianship or pursue something else. So that in itself was really interesting. But the diversity of the information she put in. So she talks about the history of our medical care and how and the clinical gaze, and how that's been problematic and continues to be problematic today. So it's really good to hear about that. I had mentioned Native Americans a couple times, which was fun in terms of, I like to hear about that, but I almost wish she went further into it. But I mean, I could look into my own sources for that as well. But yeah, it was just ultimately like a fun read. So if you're interested in it and like learning more about like medical librarianship or like a medical point of books bound in human skin, like, I highly suggest this book. Like, it's a fun nonfiction, I feel like, and the audiobook is really fun. That's one thing I hope to continue doing on my channel, is give you reviews of some nonfiction books that I particularly find really interesting. I know for a while I was steering clear of nonfiction. I mean, not since I've started BookTube, but like before I was, because I was taught nonfiction as not fun. That was how I was taught in school to remember it by. And so I always kind of figured that nonfiction were these dry academic books that really I would not be into, and that's further from the truth now. There's a lot of nonfiction books that ultimately sound like podcasts to me, and it's just really entertaining. I think one thing I kind of have to dock this book for is its cover. I really don't like this cover. I, of course, love the scientific illustration in the background. Like, I enjoy this font, and one thing that I really do, like, am attracted to in terms of book covers is when the fonts of the title kind of, like, play and entwine with the illustration on the book. However, this orange background with this yellow font and this, like, very light gray or darkish gray illustration, I don't like it. I don't think this was done well. So that's one thing I personally don't like about it. But even if it just changed this to a different color, but also yellow as a font color, it has never been the best. So especially if it's on orange. So if you've read Dark Archives, let me know your thoughts down in the description down below. I'd love to hear them. I would say no spoilers, but it's kind of hard to say that with a nonfiction book. I mean, I'm sure that, like, even me telling you my review spoiled some things for it. But there's so much to learn from this, and I hope to get into more books similar to this. Caitlin Dowdy ended up blurbing this, as well as Mary Roach. I wasn't the biggest fan of one of her books, but I do hope to get into more. But Caitlin Dowdy I've read from before and really do enjoy her books. So yeah, if you made it this far, be sure to hit the thumbs up button, as well as the subscribe button if you have yet to do so already. The little bell icon will notify you when I post more content. Otherwise, I hope that you are having a great day and are in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading. I will talk to you again soon. Chew.